Hello, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us today. My name is Stephen Greco. I'm head of product here at Axia Technology Partners, and I'm also your moderator for today's webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about deepfakes, also known as AI impersonations, and the threat that they pose to your business. We'll get started in just a few moments, but before, need to dig into a few housekeeping items. First, our session will run approximately 30 minutes with Q&A at the end. Also, if you'll take a moment to locate on the right side of your screen, there's a chat window. Please, anytime you have a comment or a question, go ahead and drop it into that chat and we'll do our best to respond, whether during the session or at the end during the Q&A. You'll also notice at the top right, there's a tab marked handouts. Please check out those handouts. There's some great resources there. You can easily download those and save those and use those as a reference in the future. You also may see some poll pop-ups during this session. If that happens, go ahead and answer those questions for us. We'd love to hear the feedback. Also, if by chance you'd like to schedule some individual one-on-one time with us, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to talk to you. And then the bottom left, there's a button that you can click on and easily schedule an appointment with us. And then finally, this session is being recorded, so keep an eye out for the link to this recording in your inbox, and you'll receive that at the conclusion of this event. Our goal today here is really simple. We want to equip you with the knowledge and the strategies to protect your business from AI-driven impersonations and fraud. And there is no better person to lead us through this topic than Roger Veach, the president and CEO of Axia Technology Partners. Roger brings over 30 years of IT leadership across industries such as Major League Baseball, motorsports, construction, healthcare, manufacturing, and more. He has overseen technology operations for teams as small as 30 individuals and as large as 500, with multi-million-dollar IT budgets under his direction. But beyond just his resume, Roger has an unmatched ability to connect the dots between technical complexity and real-world business risk, especially with small and medium-sized businesses. So if you've been wondering how deepfakes could impact your organization or what practical steps you can take to defend against them, this session is something you'll want to stay tuned for. So without further ado, let me introduce our speaker, Roger Veach, the president of Axia Technology Partners. Take it away, Roger.
Thanks, Stephen, and thanks everyone for being here. Again, my name is Roger Veach. I'm the CEO of Axia Technology Partners. And in my 30 years of IT experience, I've never seen a risk so serious for small to medium-sized businesses. But to set the stage for today, what I want to do is I want to share a small video with you before we get started.
Grandpa, I'm fine. This is just AI. You don't need to wire money to anyone. I am not in love with you. And I do not need your money for a plane ticket. I am AI.
This fake moon landing footage isn't classified. It's AI.
You're probably wondering how I got rich with crypto. The truth is, I didn't get rich off crypto. I don't even exist.
You might be able to tell this is fake now, but it's gonna keep getting better.
We're all AI. There could be aliens, but I'm not one of them. I'm AI.
An herbal supplement did not cure my cancer. I'm not even real.
Uncle Fred, the government has not been taken over by lizard people.
You don't need to send us $5,000 in gift cards because you missed jury duty.
Grandma, it's not real. It's AI.
It's AI.
It's AI.
Bro, it's AI.
Fake faces.
Real consequences.
Think before you trust.
It's amazing how incredibly real those videos were, isn't it? And, all of that was created by applications that are so inexpensive and accessible today. So what we want to cover today is why deepfakes matter, why AI impersonation is the next big risk for small to medium-sized businesses, cover some real-world scenarios, and give you some key defense strategies and answer any questions that you may have around this. So why do deepfakes matter? Deepfake technology has evolved so rapidly in the last few years that it's accessible to all bad actors now. It's cheap. They can get a hold of it easily. And what they're doing is they're targeting the most vulnerable businesses out there, which are small to medium-sized businesses. These are AI generated videos, images, voice, and even email messages. And you may be asking yourself, well, why is AI impersonation the next big risk? Well, I covered it just a little bit, in the first slide there. The tools are so accessible now. They make it easy and cheap for a bad actor to create fraud now. And they can use just a sliver of your voice or just an image of you to create a fake video. And a lot of remote tools like Zoom, Teams, and Slack that we use to communicate with every day, they validate an email address and they validate through multi-factor authentication, but they don't validate you are who you say you are. And they don't match a face or a voice with an account. And so, we've seen examples where, bad actors have created a fake person set for a remote job interview and then took the job with the organization. And HR and the organization had no clue that this was a made-up person. And two, most defenses now rely on guesswork. Deepfake detection software doesn't offer certainty. All it does is it tells us there's an anomaly and this may be fake and for us to look at it further, but we still have to use our gut and our intuition to determine if it's fake or not. And the bad thing about this is these bad actors are preying on our trust and our intuition, and that is how they trick us into allowing them access. Type of deepfake attacks, there's really three major ones that we're seeing today. Presentation attacks. This is where someone tries to trick facial recognition system, either voice or face or even fingerprints. We're seeing now that some bad actors have the technology to print 3D print fingerprints. And then they can use that to trick a bio reader and allowing access into the system. And injection attacks. In this case, what happens is a hacker introduces a fake voice or video or an image into a system's database. So for example, let's say that the system is using a face recognition of you. And what the bad actor can do is they can hack into the system, change that face recognition image to their face recognition image or a made up one for that example, and use that to trick the biometrics into allowing access. And then there's social engineering. Scammers use deepfake audio or video to pretend to be someone you trust. You'll hear about these cases all the time of, hey, I got a text message from the CEO telling me I needed to do this right away because he was in a meeting and he was busy and, need this. So what they're doing there is they're social engineering you into believing there's urgency in getting you to let your guard down and go around the typical chain of custody for acquiring things or purchasing things and go straight to the CEO or the supervisor because you want to do what is asked of you. And so this pressure ends up engineering your emotions into doing something that you would normally not do. So if we look at this by the numbers, voice cloning now only requires 3 to 5 seconds of a sample audio to create a convincing voice. That's pretty remarkable, isn't it? And in facial manipulation, 68% of deepfakes are now nearly indistinguishable. So they can manipulate these images and you cannot tell them from real. And then financial loss from deepfakes had surpassed $200 million in Q1 of 2025. So this is almost $1 billion a year industry, and it's only growing and getting worse. So, I want to talk about some real world scenarios, and everyone a lot of times believes that, this will never happen to me. But, you know, we've seen instances where small businesses have actually been affected by this. You know, one is a small construction company. They recently fell victim. The CFO received a video call from the CEO requesting an urgent transfer to secure a new equipment deal. They were starting a new project. They needed to buy some bulldozers. And, you know, they reached out and said, hey, I need you to transfer this money immediately so we can make sure we get the equipment in time to start the project. It looked and sounded exactly like the CEO. It was all AI generated. And with minutes, that CFO had wired $150,000 to this bad actor. So, you know, some takeaways that you can have from this is always verify through a secondary communication channel. For example, if the CEO reaches out to you through Teams, call him back on his cell phone, or send an email asking for a written confirmation, or set up a verbal code word, you know, for financial approvals within your organization. We do that here. You know, when something has to be paid quickly, that's out of our normal payment process, we end up making 3 individuals have to touch that before it's turned loose. And then train your staff on red flags. You know, a lot of times on these videos, you can match, you know, see a lip sync mismatch or unnatural audio quality. Or another thing is, if, you know, once we work with someone for, you know, a number of years or months, we end up picking up on phrases that they always use. So look for phrases that, you know, that they would not typically use that you're seeing in this. A second scenario, we had a fake customer review video for a local restaurant owner. You know, they find this video circulating on social media, and it was showing a supposed customer, you know, who suffered food poisoning after dining at their establishment. It looked real, but the owner could never recall the customer. It turns out, after research, they found out it was a deep fake designed to damage the restaurant's reputation, to get, you know, patrons not to attend to the restaurant. So a key takeaway here is, you know, social media has become the playground for fake deep fakes and fake videos and fake audio clips. So, you know, regularly monitor your brand's online presence. You know, jump in there every other day, take a look and see what's going on. Read those comments or put someone in charge of that. And then implement a crisis communication plan to address false content quickly. You know, a lot of people's first response is to stick their head in the sand, and they're afraid that if they say something about it, that it's proving that it was true. You know, the best thing to do in situations like this is hit it head on. Just, you know, come out swinging, let them know that this was not true, that it was fake, so that everyone on social media can see that, you know, this was fake. And then use simple AI detection tools to verify suspicious videos. You know, there are certain tools out there. You can pull the video down, run it through it, and that tool can tell you if it's fake or not. And then a final story was a small business owner's voice was cloned with an AI and used to convince his controller to wire $250,000 to a new bank account for existing vendor. And, you know, what was so unique about this was this bad actor had researched and determined the vendors that this particular small business purchased from. And what they did was they created a fake invoice coming from that vendor. They spoofed their email address, sent it to the controller, as well as they called the controller saying that, you know, they were the owner, and said, hey, you know, company XYZ has a new bank account. You know, they need us to start sending their invoice payments to this bank account rather than the old bank account. So the controller believed that and started wiring the invoice payments to that. Over $250,000 was wired to this bad actor. The bad thing about this is, you know, the company, they believed it was a vendor that they've worked with for years, and they just thought that they changed their banking information. But because the money was wired, it could not be pulled back. So, something that we've done in our organization is all of our payments are ACH. We only do wires when it's, triple verified. So, that's one step that you can do as a takeaway here. And then to verify all your vendor information changes directly with the vendor through a call you initiate to a trusted number or a callback number. And then verify the request is coming from a trusted number before you call it. A lot of times, these bad actors, they'll spoof phone numbers and email addresses. So whenever you reply, always look and see if the reply address is exactly, what the address was that it came from, or that the phone number is legit. Something that I do all the time to verify if something is real is, if I have a telemarketer call me and it is a service that I want to purchase or something I'm interested in, I'll immediately call the number back. And if I get that number was not a working number, I immediately know that this was fake. And so, those are some tips that you can do in that type of situation. There are a lot of scams out there. So a few other scams you can also watch out for. We touched on this earlier, the CEO impersonation scam. Fake urgent text from the CEO, request gift cards, wire transfers, or sensitive information. And they always say that they're in the meeting and they can't talk right now. With my people, I never tell my people that I can't talk if I need to talk to them, if I want them to do something. And, so that goes back to understanding those phrases. And business email compromise. Hackers spoof real email accounts daily. It's become a pandemic, actually. And they'll ask to change the details like we talked about there in the example number 3 I gave you. And they always target finance and vendor teams. And then, back to fake invoice scam. This fake invoice scam is so scary because the thing about it is it becomes really dangerous because they will send you a PDF or a Word document with an invoice to your accounts payable department. The scary thing about this is that can have a payload that will allow ransomware to be loaded into your internal network. So that's why it's really important to, verify what you're opening. And two, you can control this by training your employees not to open everything they receive. And two, implementing some sort of email protection system that scans these files before they get into the email inbox. Or create a standard for your vendors to email invoices into so that, we always know that they're coming from a trusted email account. And then payroll diversion W-2 scams. This happens all the time. The fraudsters will request paycheck deposit changes or W-2 forms. So what they'll do is they'll act as an employee and they'll say, hey, I changed my bank account. I need to change my bank account to a new bank. And then what it is, it's actually the bank account of the fraudster. So, and they've gotten really good at this, it's either posing as the employee or a tax service. And, so this leads to not only theft of funds, but it also leads to identity fraud or identity theft. So, all of these are scams that we need to look out for today. So what are some key defense strategies? We've pointed out everything that's there, but, let's talk about how we can combat these things. How does in videos, let's look for visual and audio red flags, lip sync mismatches, eye blinking, odd lighting, voice inconsistency, robotic tone, or simply using phrases that person would not typically use. Or there are some phrases that AI uses that humans do not use that a lot of times you can pick up on. Simple detection tools that we can utilize for all this. They're web-based scanners. There are infrastructure-based scanners. What I like about the infrastructure-based scanners is they're actually loaded onto your network infrastructure. So they're scanning every file that comes in and out of your network infrastructure to see if it's fake or if it's real. And, build in email communication and monitoring tools. We talked about that earlier where I was talking about, they would send you a fake invoice and within that document or that file, was a payload to load ransomware onto your network. So, email communication monitoring tools help with that a lot. And, we have a product here, our Axia Shield, and that's one thing it does is it monitors email communications. Funny thing to say here, but we're using AI to do that. We're using AI to combat AI. So, these are all simple tools that you can work into your IT tech stack to help protect you against all of this. One of the things I talk about all the time is trust but verify. Trust is one of those things that it can be eroded away very quickly. And sometimes you can get to where you don't trust anything, and then that creates more problems for you as well. But there's certain instances where you just have to trust. But when you are in those instances, always question the authenticity of the video or the audio message. Implement verification protocols before acting on any critical information. Verify, that your trust is intact, that what you're trusting is real. In multi-factor authentication, don't rely solely on videos or voice messages when authorizing transactions for responding to critical communications. This is what I talked about here with our organization. If something has to be paid quickly, it has to have 3 approvals. And then that way we can make sure that, this is not a fraudster trying to get us to pay an invoice that wasn't ours to begin with. So, implement verbal code words or multi-step verification processes. This is so critical for financial approvals. Staff training. This goes further than any tool that you can put on your network. Train your team to look for and recognize audio and visual red flags. Implement regular training to keep awareness high and reduce the risk of falling for these attacks. One thing about our Axia Shield product, we actually send out sample attacks, sample phishing, to your users. And what happens is, based upon how they react to that and what they do, we tailor a training program just for that individual based upon what scams that we feel that they will be preyed upon or fall prey to. Crisis planning, this is something no one ever really wants to think about, because you're afraid, when you're made vulnerable by a hacker, that it's going to hurt the reputation of your business, and it's going to damage your business beyond repair. And like we all remember when Target was one of the very first organizations to be hacked, through credit card fraud and people's information. We have found that the companies that hit this head on don't try to hide it or communicate very directly to their customers and their vendors of what happened, have a better result than companies that don't. So from that, what we need to do is develop a clear protocol for responding to fraudulent contact. How are we going to notify our internal teams? And let's notify our internal teams as quick as possible so everyone in the organization knows what's going on, so that when someone calls in, they're not fielding a question for the first time. They have a response that that is thoughtful and comes from the organization and covers all the legal issues that we need to cover. And then communicate with vendors. Immediately reach out to your vendors. Let them know that this has happened and not to fall prey for this. This happened to me just the other day with a company in Oklahoma. I received an email from them saying, hey, I need you to bid on this project. I need the bid, back really soon. And I've never worked with that company before. And so what I did was I reached out to them right away and I said, hey, I received this. This seemed unusual. And the guy admitted to me, he goes, yeah, I said, we've been hacked. Someone gained access to my email. They sent all this out. He says, anything you do not open this file because it contains a payload. And which our system had already marked it, that it had a payload in it. But what I wanted to do was to reach out to them and let them know what had happened, because a lot of times these organizations, they won't know this because people will just look at it and delete it, or an email product will grab it and put it in quarantine. So, for us to combat this, we have to help everyone. So whenever those type things happen, reach out to that person immediately. Same thing here is communicating to your vendors. And then reporting to the authorities. When this has happened to you, choose the appropriate authority, whether it's state, local, or federal, and report this as soon as possible. Because this may turn out to be more than you think it is, and you may need more protection as you move forward, as far as catching the criminals. Or if you reach out to them quick enough, they may be able to come in and perform forensics before that data is destroyed, to where they could actually catch who created this or done this. And then always issue a public statement when necessary. So, the thing to do here is have a proactive plan that helps you respond efficiently and minimizes your reputational damage. Used to it was if you got hacked. Now, for a lot of organizations, it's when you get hacked. There are Fortune 500 companies with the best security teams in the world that have been hacked. So everyone is vulnerable to this, and we have to do our due diligence to protect our assets, protect our people, our vendors, our customers, and our reputation. So detection tools, I mentioned a little bit about those earlier. There are a lot of detection tools out there. We have 3 here that are affordable tools that can lead to real-time monitoring for you. 2 of these have real-time monitoring. 1 of them does not. Resemble AI and Veritas, they both have real-time monitoring. What I like best about these 2 products is they're loaded onto your infrastructure. They're monitoring all the time. They're looking at everything that comes in and out of your network, and it's pretty impressive what these 2 tools can do. And know before, it's a great product as well, but it's more of you have to present the information into it. These are just 3 of the many tools that are out there. And one thing I do want to caution you of, just because I told you about these 3 tools doesn't mean they're the right tool for your business. That's why we need to do a consultation with you. Understand all the information that's going in and out of your network, what products you're using, and then we can help you determine which product is best. Because, we might find one of these products has false positives with certain things you're doing, or one of these products may not even detect certain things that you're doing. So, even though we're talking about these, we need to really do a complete consultation of your network and help you understand which one fits what your needs the best. So, legal reputational preparedness. This is tricky, and this is something but you always have to do this, and it's very important. It's one of the most important things. Establish a list of verified legal contacts and create a public response plan for your business so that you can address any fake content credibly. It's the old adage. It's not what happens to you is not as important as how you handle it. And that's the same thing with these attacks. A lot of companies have gained greater trust because of the way they've handled attack than companies that have tried to sweep attacks underneath the rug, thinking that that it will never come out. So, if we're here, on this, my suggestion is to find out the most credible way that you can handle this, legally and, from a public response to ensure you maintain the trust and integrity of your business. So, how can we help you? At Axia, we've been doing this for, over 30 years. So we've seen a lot of things come, during that period. It's kind of funny. Someone told me one time, a 30-year-old tech company is like a 300-year-old manufacturing company. We've seen a lot of changes, from the Novell days to, the basic COBOL days to, AI now. So, we can help you on identifying vulnerabilities, implement detection software, and monitoring your digital footprint. Your digital footprint is very critical because, these bad actors, they utilize your digital footprint to find vulnerabilities and find ways to, to attack your company and to prey upon the trust of your employees. You want to monitor, we can help you monitor and rapidly respond to cyber threats. As I mentioned, our security product utilizes AI to analyze this. By utilizing AI to analyze everything, we can analyze so much more data, so much faster. We can rapidly determine that something is going on, where before it would take us, maybe 8 to 10 hours. Now we can do it in a matter of moments. And train your staff, recognize these threats as part of a comprehensive cybersecurity strategy. And the other thing is we can help you with cybersecurity insurance as well. And what I have found, cybersecurity insurance is you're not only paying for protection if something does happen. A lot of times with cybersecurity insurance, if you pick the right vendor, that vendor will assist you in training for your staff. They will do a complimentary audit of your IT infrastructure every year to help you see your vulnerabilities and spot your vulnerabilities. And that's one thing that is one of the reasons we wanted to offer cybersecurity insurance, because we felt as offering cybersecurity insurance for our clients enables them to be able to gain all of that auditing and that compliance without really having to pay for it. You pay for the cybersecurity insurance, and then the cybersecurity insurance helps you create all of this. And some of these cybersecurity insurance firms are tremendous when it comes to helping small businesses. The amount of resources that are at your fingertips, it's amazing. So, that's really all I had to cover today. And, I'd love to answer some questions and see, what your thoughts are and what we could do to help you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Roger. We appreciate your insight, and we do
No
have
problem.
a few questions here. The
Okay, great.
most popular question is, "Are you the real Roger Veach?" And
It is me.
it is you. And hopefully
Yeah,
through some of
it
the
is.
tips that we've received from you today, people have been able to spot that.
Yeah,
I have
absolutely.
another question here. I'm just going to read it to you. It
Okay.
says, "What should I do if I got tricked by a deep fake and realized it too late? Is there anything I can do to fix it?"
Yeah, the first thing to do is don't panic, because that's what these bad actors, these ransomware, I call them terrorist type individuals do, is they play on your emotions. They want you to panic. They want you to do things and not think them out. They want you to react swiftly and make a mistake. So the best thing to do is don't panic. Act quickly, but be smart about how you act quickly. Report the incident to your IT team or your security provider that is doing all this for you, and then document everything. It's so important to document everything. And it's also so important to protect the forensic data so that we can go back and research of what's going on. We had a client in California that was hacked about 4 years ago. And through the forensic data that was left on the machine, we were able to come back, pinpoint where the vulnerability started so that we could stop it from happening again. And then, contact your banking, and legal counsel immediately. Banks are the first people you want to contact. That should be one of your very first calls. And then notify impacted parties, and then, as I mentioned before in the webinar, is have a communication plan. Be ready for that plan to enact and carry it out.
No, fantastic. So don't panic. You outlined a number
Yeah.
of steps that should be documented beforehand just to be
Right.
prepared. And it sounds like
Absolutely.
one of the worst things you can do is do nothing, right?
Exactly. Don't put your hand in the sand. It's not going to be good for anyone.
All right. Another question. If I see a deep fake that could hurt someone or cause trouble, is there a way to report it or stop it from spreading?
Absolutely. Just about, well, all social media platforms out there nowadays, they have a place where you can report, deep fakes or impersonations. I see this happen a lot, with friends on Facebook. You'll be friends with somebody on Facebook, and the next thing you know, you receive a friend request from them and you're thinking, oh wow, why am I receiving another friend request when I'm already a friend? And that's an impersonation attack. So whenever you see those type things, immediately notify Facebook that you feel that that is an impersonation, because the thing about it is you may send the message to your friend, and if their account is compromised, they may not get to it, or they may not get to it for a while. But Facebook or these other social media platforms, they immediately have a team there ready to handle this, and a lot of times they can shut that down before it's ever an issue.
Awesome. So we're all a member of this online community, right? So we need to look after one another and try to report anything that we see. Even if it doesn't harm us, it could harm someone else. So
Exactly.
fantastic. Another question here. What should a small business do if someone uses its name or a person's face in a deepfake video? Is there legal or a PR response I can take?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing to do is preserve the evidence. Get a copy of the video so that you have it, and then engage your legal and counsel teams to send a takedown notice or a cease and desist. Again, Facebook, LinkedIn, all these social media platforms, they have teams that handle this. So the first thing to do is reach out to them, get it taken down. But before you get it taken down, preserve that evidence, get a copy of it so that you can handle it from a legal and a PR standpoint. And you may need to send out a PR response after this explaining that this was fake.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Roger. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Everyone, thank you for your questions. If your question, we ran out of time, don't worry. We'll go ahead and send you email responses to your questions. But really just want to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. Hopefully you're walking away feeling more prepared to how to respond to deepfake threats today. Again, if you have any more questions or want to talk to us, go ahead and click on that button in the bottom left and schedule some time. We can help you feel more comfortable. We can help put together a crisis plan with you. Go ahead and click on that button at your convenience. And everyone, please stay safe out there. And remember, in a world of AI-generated content, trust but verify is your best defense. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Have a good